Good morning, friends. This video is a humble attempt to learn from historical perspective the attempts for unifying the mode of celebration of Qurbana in Syro Malabar Church, unity and uniformity in liturgy in the Syro Malabar Church. Historical background of the Syro Malabar Church. Saint Thomas, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, landed in Kodungalur on 21st of November 52 CE. St. Thomas proclaimed the good news in India and was martyred at Mylapore on 3rd July 72 CE. In 345 CE, under the leadership of Thomas of Cana, a group of Christians from Chaldea migrated to Malabar coast. St. Thomas Christians were using East Syriac as the liturgical language. The coming of the Chaldeans boosted their Christian life. From that time onwards, the bishops of St. Thomas Christians used to come from Chaldea. Archbishop Abraham was the last bishop who came from Chaldea. He reached Malabar in 1570 and was imprisoned by the Portuguese. In 1498, Vasco da Gama, the Portuguese navigator, arrived at Kozhikode. In 1524, Vasco da Gama was appointed Portuguese viceroy in India. In December the same year, he died in Kochi. The Portuguese were powerful in Kochi and Goa. Araixo de Menezes was consecrated Archbishop of Goa in 1595. Making use of special rights granted to the Portuguese by the Holy See, Padroada rights, he illegally convened the Synod of Udayamperur in 1599. The Diocese of Angamali was brought under Goa. Syriac liturgical texts and books were destroyed. The resistance of St. Thomas Christians against the suppression of their right culminated in the Coonam Cross Oath of 1653. In order to keep the Malabar Christians within the church, Rome erected in 1657 the Vicariate of Malabar at Varapura, and the St. Thomas Christians were brought under its jurisdiction. In 1665, an Orthodox bishop of Antioch arrived in Malabar through the help of the Dutch in Kochi. St. Thomas Christians of Malabar got divided into two groups, those who belonged to Antioch, Orthodox or Jacobite, and those who belonged to Rome, Catholic. Those who accepted Antiochian See followed West Syrian liturgical tradition. Those who remained loyal to Rome were ruled by the Latin bishops. The liturgy and the customs of this group was Latinized to a certain extent, though they continued with the Syrian rite. They yearned for East Syrian liturgy and traditions, but their bishops were missionaries from Europe. Priests in the Malabar Church were formed by Malpans, who taught the scholastics Syriac language, Syrian traditions, and the liturgical rites. Saint Chavara and liturgical renewal. Malpans formed their wards differently. Hence, liturgical celebrations, administering of sacraments, singing of hymns, recitation of the canonical prayers, etc., had different variants. Saint Chavara, being inspired by his Malpan, Palekal Thoma, took up the challenging task of collecting the manuscripts of canonical prayers, and he composed the canonical prayers in Syriac language. The manuscript of the canonical prayers was ready by 1862. By a circular letter of February 1869, Father Chavara collected orders from the priests to print the text of the canonical prayers. Saint Chavara was called to his eternal reward in 1871. The book was published 5 years later, after his death in 1876. This was the divine office in use till 1963 in Syro Malabar Church. Uniform mode of liturgical celebration. After the Synod of Uddayam Perur, the St. Thomas Christians were either under Vicariate of Varapura or under the Portuguese Governador of Kodungalur, or they were among the Jacobite group. The manner of liturgical celebration varied from place to place. Saint Chavara prepared a book in Syriac, Tukasa, containing the detailed rituals of the liturgical celebration. It instructs the priest with the details of how he should wash his hands before the Mass, how the vestments are to be worn, how to bow down, kneel, etc. The Syriac Mass text was printed in 1774 in Rome and reprinted in 1784. The rubrics were not included in the text. Tukasa made it possible for the Syrian priests to celebrate the Mass in a uniform manner. It was reprinted in 1926 and 1962. The Second Vatican Council brought in a lot of changes in liturgy. 1. The Council allowed starting of celebrating Mass in vernacular languages. Latin and other Oriental liturgies were translated into vernacular. The new Mass was introduced in the Latin Church. It was facing the people. Towards the end of the 20th century, in a final text of the Mass in Latin Rite, with clear instructions and rubrics, was prepared and promulgated by the Pope. In Syro Malabar Rite, so many forms of celebrating Mass emerged. In the collective consciousness of Syro Malabar Christians, many wounds and scars were buried. From the time of the coming of the Portuguese, they were forcefully weaned from their spiritual resource, the East Syrian tradition. They were forcefully and stealthily brought under the Latin jurisdiction of the Portuguese. The Synod of Udayampere treated them as heretics and destroyed their patrimony. The St. Thomas Christians were broken into pieces: Catholic group, Jacobites, Orthodox, Marthomites, etc. The Syrian liturgy was Latinized. Some wanted restoration, some others wanted only partial restoring. The period immediately after the Second Vatican Council was time when so many forms of celebrations emerged. Mass facing people, Mass facing the altar, Mass facing people and the altar part by part, Mass squatting around a low altar in the Indian form, Mass sitting on chairs and seats, Mass standing throughout. Since Syro Malabar Church expanded beyond Kerala, translations were needed. Translations came up in Hindi, English, Gujarati, Marathi, Telugu, Tamil, English, etc. Towards uniformity. We must thank the Lord that now we have a text in Malayalam, agreed upon by all and approved by Rome. We have solved our problems regarding names and pronouns and terms to address God. We have reached an agreement regarding the Our Father, long form or short form, to be recited in 3 places, 2 places, or 1 place. We have decided to recite only the Nicene Creed and not the Apostles' Creed. We have reduced the length of some of the prayers. We have cut short repetitions. We have resolved our theological problems regarding offertory. We have resolved the problem of offertory procession. We have settled all issues regarding vestments. We have resolved our differences regarding feasts, fasts, and calendar. The early church was on the brim of a division. The Jerusalem Council was convened. Jewish Christians insisted that all should observe the Jewish law. Gentile Christians argued that they were saved by Jesus, not by the law. They did not want all those rituals like circumcision. Peter and Paul spoke. Final words were from James, brother of Jesus. All accepted the decision not to give burdens to the Gentile Christians. Acts chapter 15. Here our issue is much lighter. With a grateful heart, we must dwell on the graces we have received. The Sui Juris Church, the All India Jurisdiction, Kolla Hendon, canonized saints, missions, vocations, committed and responsible laity. We should fulfill what is remaining. The request of the Holy Father to have a unified and uniform mode of divine worship, towards which very little remains to be achieved. May the Lord bless us. Amen. Thank you.